Hi, welcome back to my garden. For the last few weeks, actually it's more than a month now, I've been exploring the idea of the comfort zone and why we need to stretch ourselves, stop doing the things that are safe and secure, and take up challenges in order to grow, whether it's within a learning environment or in our personal lives or any other context for that matter. Now, last week I made the case for embracing the reasonably unreasonable. So not things that are so unreasonable as to be ludicrously, self-destructively foolhardy, jumping out of planes or tall buildings without a clear safety plan in mind. No, not that sort of thing. Although, of course, doing some incredibly foolhardy, almost suicidal things sometimes is called for if you're in sufficiently desperate straits. You're on a sinking ship in freezing waters, and the ship is literally about to go down. Well, unless you jump off it, cling onto some sort of life raft, and get as far away as you can, the sinking ship is going to drag you down to a watery grave. So, there are occasions when calculated craziness is called for. I'm not talking about that. And when I thought about my own life, it seems to me that I have kind of progressed through ever more risky sort of life decisions. It's been a sort of growth curve in a way. Let me explain what I mean. After completing my sort of checkered university career, I was faced with the, for me, rather unappetizing prospect of military service. So I investigated a little bit, had a British passport, and I fled the country. And that in itself is, might be argued as leaving a sinking ship. I don't want to be drawn into the ins and outs of that sort of description. But it certainly was a bold move. But reasonably unreasonable, perhaps not. I mean, other people had done that before me. It was bold, but not unreasonable. And things developed in England. But I reached a stage where my career, as it was developing in the teaching world, had stalled. I found myself living in a squalid council flat in Fulham, unemployed, struggling to make ends meet on occasional supply teaching work, and generally things weren't going well. I saw an advert for a job in Peru, so I said, what the hell? But again, I would argue that this was maybe daring, and it certainly wasn't risk-averse in any sense, but it was a sort of a challenge, but not something that one would describe as being unreasonable. And I'm digging in, and I think it's important for all of us, certainly I find it, to sort of place our own lives under a little bit of scrutiny, and you sort of sometimes are left thinking that dramatic or exciting narratives that you've built up are perhaps not really that extraordinary under closer scrutiny. I mean, unusual. Not many people follow my life path, but, I haven't followed the life path of those people. And it sort of continued. The school, things were going very nicely. And then an opportunity presented itself. A friend of mine tempted me with the idea of opening a bar. Now, I think that is the first indisputably out of plane without a parachute thing that I did. Had I gone to Peru in the first place without a job, that would have been another matter altogether. But I didn't. I had guaranteed employment and a place to stay when I got there. The Grand Hotel Miraflores, 4 stars, hardly lacking in comfort. But when I left the school, cashed in all my life savings to open a bar called Heaven and Hell. Now that was the reasonably unreasonable. And I think as I was questioning myself before making the decision, I received some very good advice from the head of our senior school, who suggested to me, think about it. If it goes terribly wrong, the worst case scenario, and actually the scenario that came to pass, what would happen? Well, I'd just go back to teaching. It was difficult. I slept on floors for a while. I took an enormous pay cut to get another teaching job at the school I'd been working before. But life went on. So the worst case scenario turned out to be livable. And I could see that at the time. At the time of embarking on this adventure, I was in my early 30s. The flip side of that coin was spending a life wondering what if. And this is what my head warned me against, and a good friend. And indeed, I think that's true for many of us. There are things that we can do that seem on the surface terribly risky, losing all your life savings. But actually, they are manageable for whatever reasons. In my case, there were 2 things on my side. I had a bankable skill that would always enable me to get back on track. For that matter, it had enabled me to overcome the problem in England of what do you do when the money runs out. I moved from South Africa to England with a 1.5 year salary saved. It was gone in a couple of months. Exchange rate and foolishness had taken care of what little I'd been able to save, and things weren't looking good. But I managed to start making some money doing private maths tuition, and then eventually found a job as a maths teacher, because it seems, for rightly or wrongly, the world needs maths teachers. Now, I went back to the school, and I think I'd gained a powerful insight. That is one that you really only gain from experience about what difficulties are manageable. And, things might have turned out terribly, but they didn't. And as I say, although I was taking risks, some calculation had been made. In all honesty, not terribly much. It was quite an impulsive decision. It would be different if you were in a job with a fantastic retirement pension type thing at 65 or 45 or 55, maybe you're in the services or something like that, and chucking it all in with a couple of years to go on a win is a whole different story. Or taking an enormous risk when you're middle-aged and have a family and children to support is quite different to taking a risk when you're footloose and fancy free. This is the kind of calculus we need to dig into. But do we tend to side on the cautious side or on the more devil may care? And society encourages us to side with a type of caution. Of course, it encourages you to throw caution to the wind in other areas, for example, buying things you don't need, but that's a story for another video. My latest adventure, this move to the northeast Brazil, leaving teaching at 47, and starting a new life. It made enormous sense at the time, both in terms of the relationship I'm in. My wife is from here. It was a chance for her to see out the remaining days of her parents' lives. In her mother's case, it was only a year. In her father's case, it was nearly 10. But in both, it was incalculably wonderful. A priceless thing, sort of gift that retiring from teaching gave us. And I say us because, it was wonderful that I got to know them better myself. There have been times when I've looked at what I'm doing and thought, what madness, what possessed me? Because sometimes I do feel as if I've crossed into another world. And I guess maybe that's an important point to reach. This idea of leaving our comfort zone might be thought of as a sort of part in the learning cycle. But what I'm talking about when we sort of embrace risks is something more akin to another of my favorite topics, the hero's journey. It is this idea of crossing into another world, of rejecting humdrum normality and challenging yourself with an environment, a life that bends all the rules as you knew them. And maybe the hero's journey is the things that I've sort of gravitated towards in the last 10 years of another of the gifts, frankly, that leaving the teaching profession gave me was time for this sort of introspection. I had it when I was working, but my free time I always thought as decompression time, and digging into the hero's journey or going for a pint with my mates and watching a game of football, well, it was a no-brainer which choice I was going to make. And that's changed progressively since I've moved here. And this idea of crossing over to another side of life, well, I think that's one worth exploring. I mean, I've explored it on this channel at great length. And will I go back there? Maybe, maybe not. If it's not something that you've explored, I'd encourage you to go down a rabbit hole. There you'll find amazing stuff. No doubt about that. But I think you'll be richly rewarded. Anyway, as always, I've rambled on far longer than perhaps is necessary. If you're still with me, bless you. You have the patience of a saint. And if you have some interesting observations, go on, share them. Otherwise, I trust your lives are filled with joy. Until next week, sunny blue